Okay, there we go.
Hello, this is Sir Sean Parker for Empowering the Innocent and False Allegations Watch, and we're going to talk today to Anna Thomas, who took on the civil service with the support of the Free Speech Union recently over the last couple of years. Actually, she'll tell us all about the story. She's been all over the media because her story is incredibly important and compelling right now, and yeah, so let's say hello. Hi, Anna.
Hello.
Hello. Got the world behind you there. Got the world in your
I
hands.
do.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So you've been all over the place recently. You were just in the Times a couple of weeks, just a few days ago, with a wonderful article. The, you've had the shares with Alison Pearson, and you've had a brilliant representation from Mr. Bryn Harris of the Free Speech Union, who's who is a story we'll get to. Here's the headline: that you were awarded £100,000 from the civil service, basically because you would not go along with their compelling of your speech and thought. Do you want to correct any of that for me?
That sounds about right. I noticed that there was politicisation in the department and I called it out and I was fired. That's kind of the long and the short of it, really. So it was very unjust.
Yeah. Um, what what sort of part of this story did you decide that you weren't going along with what? Because I imagine that all of your colleagues were going along with it because people are compelled to. At what point did you say I'm not going to and to stand up?
So when I came back from maternity leave, after having my daughter, this was the post George Floyd era, I call it. So it was August 2020, and there was a big media frenzy around the topic of race. And when I went back, they had set up what's called an anti-racism hub or an anti-race hub. And it was full of literature, resources that were all based really in critical race theory. And I was just like, okay, well, whether I personally agree with it or not, that's neither here nor there. We have a code to adhere to. I thought the DWP can't take this stance and adopt it and it not raise concern because it was a complete breach of the impartiality part of the code. So basically, since August 2020, when I went back from maternity leave.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, what's the reason that you think that the civil service, amongst kind of other institutions of people who'll be watching this, of course, it's almost everywhere, isn't it? What point do you think they brought this in, and why?
I definitely think it was to do with George Floyd's death, and they followed the kind of court of public opinion in the media that Derek Chauvin was guilty, that this wasn't an act of racism and that it could possibly mean nothing else. And when really they should have just not said about it. That they should have just, and bear in mind it's coming from another country. You know, we've imported this foreign entity into our civil service. Critical race theory does stem from America. So yeah, they should have exercised a bit more caution with it, but it's popular to adopt those kind of terms. It's virtue signaling.
Yeah, no, you just kind of use the term kind of critical race theory. Would you explain to our people what you mean by that?
Okay, so critical race theory it was originally a legal framework in America, and it talks about the concepts of things like white privilege, black victimhood. Everything is institutionally racist, and although it holds up little to no weight at all, it has gone down through the university systems and is being taught to students who adopt it, and then they go into other jobs and they take that with them, and then it's infiltrated in the school system, in the government, in private sector, and the third sector. So by critical race theory, I do mean an ideology, essentially.
Yeah, and it isn't just the race, is it? It's the critical GENDER, critical gender theory as well.
Yeah.
Do these things intersect as far as you're concerned as well? Or
Yeah, I mean, intersectionality was really coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, who is a big proponent of critical race theory, and she does adopt this kind of gender ideology as well. And it's based in people and separating people based on either immutable characteristics such as race and sex, or more of a belief system such as gender identity. And so this is why you tend to find, like, capital Black Lives Matter, you'll often find it follows suit of Black Trans Lives Matter and things like that. So it is very intersectional. You can't really have one without the other.
That's fascinating stuff. And you got the Free Speech Union involved. Did they approach you? Did you approach them? How did that all unfold?
So I contacted an organisation called Counterweight, and I had a meeting with one of the ladies there who was really, really lovely. And she said, you really do need to contact the Free Speech Union about this. This is when it really, really started kicking off for me. And I knew that, I was in trouble because of the way that they were treating me. And so I contacted them, I think it was February 2021, I think. And got the ball rolling from there, really.
Yeah. What did the Free Speech Union think about the impact on your freedom of speech? Because it's all, I mean, we can't imagine that you're in the office there attempting to broadcast and things, but they're controlling your speech in other ways.
Yeah.
I've got an interest in speech and in free speech and in how did they put that it was actually impacting you, or was it just on principle?
I think it was on principle. I definitely think that's questionable for Bryn than for me. Having to deal with this, I've only got a certain amount of brain space, unfortunately. So, I mean, it wasn't infringement because these hubs, you were open, you were invited to talk. And essentially it's just like, it's not talking, it's not discussing, it's agreeing. And they would put in things like, well, we don't want to derail the conversation. It's just like, well, I'm not. And they're basically like, we respectfully and kindly ask that your questioning ends here. And it's just like, no, it does not. And I went through the appropriate channels to whistleblow as well. So
what happened here, it appears, is that you went against the narrative, right? And you constructed your own counter narrative. And as anybody who works in any institution knows, it never goes the way of the person standing up to it. It's a David and Goliath story, of course, but it's gone your way. And that's, of course, the reason why all the media is going, wow, about this. Me too, us as well, in empowering the innocent. Do you think this is going to lead to other people coming forward to succeed in what happened with you, as with you, or is it a one-off, or what?
It's definitely not a one-off. I've already had contact with other civil servants and those who work in the wider public sector, so the forces, the NHS, and they've had similar problems of being silenced and not being able to say anything in case it risks their jobs. And that's not a healthy society at all, when you have to shut up and put up with radical ideologies. So yeah, I'm afraid there's a lot more where I came from.
Yeah, no, it's important. It's a liberal democracy, as you point out. What's your response to anybody online or anywhere else who kind of calls you a racist for the words that because of your stance? What do you say to them if they exist?
I don't care what they think. I really, really don't. That they have managed to dilute the terms such as racist or homophobe. I don't really believe in the concept of transphobia. I think that's a terrible way to put it. Nazi, bigot, they have diluted what these words means. And it's just like, I know I'm not these things, and so I just don't care what they think. It holds absolutely no weight in my life whatsoever. I used to care because it's just, I don't want to appear to be that way. Now I'm just like, talk to me. You'll find out that I'm not these things, and if you don't, then that's up to you. I'm not going to force you to, but they can call me what they like as far as I'm concerned. It just makes me laugh now.
Yeah, it's very inspiring stuff. in because I'm the editor of the False Allegations Watch, which is part of Empowering the Innocent, as I
Yeah.
said in the intro. Um, do you think there's an impact into being falsely accused is as to what happened to you? Because these are the kind of cases we cover. To what point do you think you were falsely accused by the civil service, basically? How did that feel?
How did it feel? Well, it was
That's not
rubbish.
that's not exactly what I meant. How does it feel? It sounded like a Newsnight journalist. I just meant, what was that like for you?
Um, to be accused of that essentially, like
Yeah.
implicitly. Well, it was wrong. I mean, it was absolutely categorically false. But I knew that once you get these labels, you're tarred and that's it. And there's nothing you can do.
Mm,
So you just have to let the chips fall where they may on that, and people will decide for themselves.
yeah. What like kind of what is really coming across with your story and with yourself is how you seem to be post label. We've all these days, especially if you're a middle class white male, for by the way, I represent many of them. We've had every label for 20 years chucked at us. You've had a bunch over the last couple of years, and as you
Mm.
pointed out, they're not relevant.
No.
Lots of things have gone to the left, and we have to say left now, even though I come from the left in the past, but now I'm considered some sort of a far right bigot because I'll agree with your stance on free speech.
Yeah.
Um, though there's a feeling that they've jumped the shark on this, as in it's not really like it's going the other way now. Things are going back to a kind of a normal, especially with what's happened to you, which is massively relevant.
Mm.
Do you think we're getting back to normal? Do you understand what I'm on about with this line?
I don't think, I think there's getting more publicity about this, but whether we're getting back to normal, I don't think so. I think we've got a long way to go, and I think it's going to take a lot of strength and a lot of courage from other people to just not care about these labels and talk about whatever it is. Actually speak about it. Coming from, because I find critical race theories kind of critical social justice theories, from a wide range, from gender to climate change. I find it very religious. And because I may have come across perhaps that I went against their religion, it is burn the witch at the stake, which is quite ironic because I am a pagan. So it's just like, well, I see.
Hmm.
But I don't care for this intersectionality. I'll speak to people and treat them how they come across to me. Generally speaking, that's pretty good. And you know, sometimes it's not. That's just life. You have to put up with it. But you can't win with them because either your silence is violence or your words are violence. You can't win. So what's the point?
Yeah, it's a double bind, isn't it?
Mm.
As they call it, there and there, and it's all over Twitter. Of course, it's kind of introduced this, though it's been around for 15 years now, but it's introduced the new discourse of how to deal with things that you don't like.
Mm-hmm.
In that film that Mr. Matt Walsh has just released, What's to Be a Woman, What is a Woman?
Yeah,
All of the conversations he has, I don't know if you've seen it yet, but the
I
person
have.
you
Yeah,
have,
a
the person that he's
fantastic
talking
documentary.
to walks away when the question's too difficult. And
Yeah.
that's a problem because that's not a discussion. And you don't
Mm.
have to be a far right nutter to sort of say, well, please just somebody explain to me what a woman is if these are going to be the terms.
Yeah.
But as I have pointed out a few times in my articles, there aren't any agreed terms anymore.
Yeah.
Um, what do you think are we going towards, especially in terms of the trans situation at the moment, maybe in the civil service? Uh,
Well, that's just come out like a day after. Um, I think I was on GB News and it came out about. I'm not going to call him Sirosa or whatever he likes to call himself. I'm going to call him Simon because I don't give credence to men calling themselves women in the first place. I think it's a dangerous road, as we've already seen men in women's prisons and things. So I called him Simon for this, but he has got a privilege. If they want to call it that, let's call it that. He has got a privilege because he falls in line with the current thing. He is allowed to be a political activist because he says the right things. I mean, he doesn't say anything right at all. He talks about women like myself apparently being genocidal Nazis, and it's just like, but that's allowed. It's rules for the
Genocide, the
movie.
genocide term. talk about. I know. Sorry, go on.
Another word that's been completely diluted. But if they can't define what a woman is, they certainly can't define what genocide is. You know.
So yeah,
Yeah.
we're talking about a person here who is on the almost at the same time that you've been coming out with your victory or your settling or whatever we want to call it. The force of right actually working for a change, Luke Skywalker style. But then Darth kind of comes out and does a whole other narrative about how you guys are wrong. And every time, of course, we post anything like this, if you've got any kind of the following, you get a bunch of people from America, usually, or probably Russian bots, swarming you and saying, how dare you, turf nutter. And of course, this sort of Posey Parker has proved that the term turf is not quite the insult that they'd like it to be anymore. And the thing is, there are people like me. I'm not a partisan guy. I don't like stances. I like objective observations. But you're sucked into it left, right, and centre. Do you think there's any escape from all this, or are you just happy to have the fight?
Yeah, so it's just, I mean, technically, I know I do describe myself as right wing because I am quite conservative. I've got some libertarian views. I've got some liberal views. I think it's quite a mixed bag. So I don't think it's really that appropriate. But it's one thing that we've got, like, you call yourself right wing, left wing. Certainly on the issue of gender, this isn't a case of right and left. It's a case of right and wrong. And right now, they want to label everyone who is knows what a woman is to be in evil, far right, etc. It's just like, no, that's not the case at all. You cannot change your sex. And there's too much evidence to show that gender identity is nothing but a fictitious religious concept. So you're either right on this or you're wrong on it. So what I say, there's plenty of radical feminists that are very left wing, a lot more socialist than I am. We agree on this. We can disagree on other things, but we can talk, and that's really important. A healthy society has to have a healthy discourse, and that does include agreeing and disagreeing, even if it gets heated sometimes. That's natural. We're humans. But yeah, here we are. It's 2023. Not allowed to have that, apparently.
Absolutely, and it's completely important to have the discourse, as we're pointing out, and as you've been pointing out recently. But you weren't allowed to do that in the civil service against their code of conduct, which you pointed out. And the academics for academic freedom all over the world, these organizations, Mr. Dennis Hayes here, attached to the Academy of Ideas, coming to the point that the academies, the universities, the places of the free thought, as we've seen with Kathleen Scott, they're as bad for this as the civil service and the Ministry of Justice, for example, too. Do you think the victory that you've had there with the civil service can be replicated in some university somewhere? Because they're all captured.
I hope so, because I think that, the universities are the main head of the Hydra, really, because that's where you do get a lot of civil servants come from, is the civil service. And a lot of these courses, even things in like STEM subjects, I've heard and I've seen reports that they're required to undergo some sort of social justice test, and it's just like, how is this going to apply to, I don't know, bioengineering? It doesn't. It's wasting their time. It's wasting everyone's time. Just let them study, help them achieve a good degree so they can go on in life and do, set up a good career for themselves. That's a good thing to do. So I definitely think the universities need a complete reform. They absolutely need to be schooled in free speech. And that's such a crazy thing to say, because you'd think a university would be in favor of that, but they're not. They're not. It's either you think the right way or you don't. Very, very black and white in that respect. Cult-like.
This is such an important point, because this concept of the Enlightenment for free speech did arguably start in England, Scotland, Britain. And now I do actually get the feeling, though we have our echo chambers, though I do keep my eye on much more than that, that the fight back in the Anglosphere anyway, is actually starting in Britain. And for a change, we could affect kind of America in this and Australasia, because those places are really, because there's such a lot of money in it over there, and of course that's here too. But we've
Yeah.
got people like you in this country who say, sorry, no, that's enough. I'm not doing any
Yeah.
more of that. And that it takes massive balls, and it's very, very valuable. And that's the reason that it's so inspiring and encouraging as well.
Mm.
The thing that's happened to you covers such a lot of other problems that we're going through. And by the way, I'm just going to check. I mean, you're not an anti-trans person, are you? I mean, I'm sure you're not. You're not an anti-anyone person by the look of you. But
I'm not an anti-human,
no.
but I know why women's rights are a thing. I'm not a feminist, but I am absolutely in favour of women's rights. We deserve our own spaces and places to operate free from men in society. That includes bathrooms, includes changing rooms. We need that because we know about sex-based, discrimination with regards to things like, sexual assault, which is a very serious thing. And, even the dynamic of putting a man in a woman's only space changed the dynamic. It's different when a woman goes into a man's space because there's less likelihood, and this is statistically speaking, that a man's going to be harmed by a so-called trans man. But we know that's not the case the other way around. That's it. And we have to keep these spaces single sex. Now, I would have been in favour of a third space, but how likely that is to happen, I don't know. And the reason why it couldn't happen even on their terms is because it others them. They want to think that they're actually women, or they want to think they're actually men when they're not. It's the only movement that demands validation from everybody else. It demands lies. It demands compliance. It is very, very religious.
I mean, it's exactly that point kind of where it goes from, obviously it's an issue for women when it's about the bathrooms and the sports, and it's when it comes to the sports, kind of guys are very enraged because it's not fair. When it comes to the toilets, it's like, well, let's try and sort that out, kind of thing. But when it comes to speech, when it comes to us having to unpack the English language, which is the most successful language in the world and an international language, in order to cater for a new style of being, because you're coming from a position of wanting everything to be the same and everyone, and to get rid of all the boundaries between people. I used to be a let's not have boundaries person, and it's only from all this that I've realized how valuable they are. The differences are important, aren't they?
Absolutely. Our biological functions are very different, and that does play a part from, womb to tomb. The way we're socialized, that's not a complete social construct. That's ridiculous. There are biological reasons why we raise our children a little bit different based on their sex. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I think it's just quite neutral. I just think it's natural. But so this kind of like, I hear the term like biological essentialism a lot, and it's just like, well, we are biological creatures, so we cannot completely remove biology from society. We can't live in like this post-truth era where we don't believe our eyes, we don't believe our senses, our instincts. We don't follow a lot of our instincts anymore. That's a problem. But I think this is why the TERFs, so I'm not a feminist, but I would be considered a TERF, were hated, because we're like, well, not everything's a bloody social construction. That's ridiculous. It's a very real thing being a woman. It comes with certain biological what's the word I'm looking for here, obligations. We tend to have periods, most of us do. We go through the menopause, we tend to have babies, and that shapes a lot of our life. It really does. And men have other biological obligations in their life. A lot of it is protecting, a lot of it is impregnating, and things like that. It's just how we work with humans. We're biological creatures. To ignore that is just absolutely ridiculous.
Well, completely is it, and it's the height of arrogance as well, isn't it? It's like because we've got the tech that we can sort of take a piece of my arm off, and or whatever they do down below. There's all kinds of different things, and it's like, well, if we can make people over 25 with dysphoria better in some ways, then okay, we can do that, and we can talk about it and think about that. But
Yeah.
when you have that as an unquestionable rule across society, because the ground is so shaky, well, don't have the ground shaky then. Have an honest conversation about the ground. Don't just
Yeah.
like try and patch things up the top and go, I hope that'll be all right. Because it's going to come crashing down. And it's happening right now. Because Mr. Jordan
Mm.
Peterson is not a turf, and Mr. Matt Walsh isn't a turf. And everybody I know with some sanity aren't turfs, including my mum,
Yeah.
And it's not even a swear word. It's a ridiculous. It's just a tag that they're
Yeah.
trying to make it that. It's, we can't be unpacking the reality any more than this, though there's the transhumanism coming, of course. So see what Elon Musk has to say
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, that is a problem.
Mm.
I think, I was reading Gad Saad's book, The Parasitic Mind, and it is a lot of it is to do with like the social constructionist. Everything is a social construction. So therefore nothing else really matters. And
Mm-hmm.
that's played a huge problem. We've now got men in women's prisons. We've now got men in women's sports. We're teaching children this awful lie. And I don't even like to say the trans community, because I think there's too many different motivations. You've got men who say they want to be women. Well, then you've got to divide that up, because you've got gay men, which is formerly known as like transsexual, homosexual. They've got different reasons to so-called transition, whereas a straight or bisexual male tends to fall into autogynephilia, and that is where he fancies himself as a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got, obviously, not all of them. I certainly wouldn't say that, but a lot of these is quite predatory behavior. Using women's spaces is boundary breaking. To me, that's a predatory thing. Fear plays a big part in the fetish, unfortunately. And for women it's different, because that there is some theories, it's lesser known, but it's the kind of escapism from womanhood, wanting to be men. And I don't deny that people with so-called gender dysphoria, which I think is a really poor name for it, because dysphoria and euphoria are not always the best emotions. To be euphoric all the time that sounds like you're on drugs. It
That's right. It's
does.
kind of it's an intense thing, isn't it? Always being out
Yeah.
there all the time, as if that's the way to be in life. Yeah,
Yeah,
which is
that's
not.
it. And the dangers of doing this to children, saying that puberty blockers are reversible or they hold no damage. You can't reverse time. You just can't do it. And it
That's a
does
real,
have an effect.
but that's a reality that Miss Jennifer Thetford Kay, who's brilliant on this on Twitter, is all over this subject, and the fact that it's the kids' part is going to basically end this, if
Mm.
not in America, well, starting here, and with stories like yours, don't all of those things are going to unpack this stuff. I was talking to Dr. Michael Norton earlier, Empowering the Innocent, who thinks that things only go forward. And I'm like, well, what is forward? What does that mean?
Mm.
And so he's like, well, let's see what happens. And
Yeah.
which point, Anna, we're running out of time. I'm going to ask you, um, you're speaking on this channel to ETI TV, to lots of
Mhm.
people who are au fait with the world of false allegations and the law, how these things all work. If anyone finds themselves at work in some kind of institution who consider themselves falsely accused of speaking their mind, which is a ridiculous kind of way of putting towards what we're talking about, what's your
Mm.
advice for them? A couple of points, maybe.
Definitely join a free speech union. Definitely.
Right,
I
good
can't
start.
recommend
Yeah.
that enough. Stand your ground and don't be cowed by terrorists, because this is what it is. It's a
Uh,
complete, to me, it's just, people like that I would consider. Obviously, we think of terrorists to be, in the same kind of range as like 9/11, those extremes. But, some of these activists are terrorists. I've been to Let Women Speak events now like that. If you find yourself in a position where you are being accused of things which are not, if you find that your employer is putting pressure on you to accept an ideology that you don't agree with, join a free speech union.
yeah, it's a good start for it.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for all of this. It's
No
been lovely
problem.
to speak to you as with the planet there behind you. And
Yeah.
I hope you do well with the rest of your media appearances, and that should go forward. And I hope that Empowering the Innocent, you would like to work with them some more as well, because you're an inspiring person for lots of
Mm.
people who are going through madness.
Yeah.
not done by themselves, done by other people. So
well, yeah, that's it. Yeah, I'm quite happy to speak to anyone, and so
lovely.
yeah, just I'm on Twitter as that Anna 23. So if anyone wants to follow me and drop me a message, please do. I understand, and I don't expect everyone to fall in line with my opinions. You're a grown-ass adult. At the end of the day, you're allowed your own opinions and your own political persuasions. That's fine. But I am here if anyone's feeling a bit of a lost end with it.
It's the spirit of spirit of independence and individuality, isn't it? It's very valuable, and it's very much often being forgotten, and we don't forget that at Empowering the Innocent, for sure. So
Yeah.
we love the Free Speech Union, and we love what you're doing. So thank you
Yes.
very much. Have a nice
Thank
rest
you,
of your
Hannah.
Saturday.
And yeah, I'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.